The emergency lights flashed red across the massive dome of the Galactic Council chamber. Hundreds of alien representatives sat in rising circular tiers, their worried voices filling the air with a mix of clicks, whistles, and translated speech. The chamber, usually a picture of order and calm, now buzzed with fear. At the highest tier, Earth's representative, Thompson, watched quietly. His simple black uniform stood in stark contrast to the ornate robes and bioluminescent displays of the other species. While others gestured wildly with multiple limbs or flickered with nervous color changes, he simply observed, taking notes on his tablet. The blue speaker, head of the council, raised all four of their arms for silence. Their crystalline skin reflected the emergency lights, casting red patterns across the chamber. "The situation is grave," they announced, their words automatically translated for all present. "The pathogen has spread to 7 star systems. 3 advanced civilizations are already reporting massive casualties." Screens appeared around the chamber, showing scenes of chaos. Advanced cities with buildings that touched the clouds were now empty. Hospitals overflowed with the sick. The most advanced species, those who had modified their bodies with biotechnology, seemed to be falling first. "Who will volunteer to help?" the blue speaker asked. "We need medical teams to enter the infected zones." The Crystal Mind, representative of one of the oldest spacefaring races, stood up. Their transparent body pulsed with thought patterns. "It would be suicide to send our people. We have evolved beyond primitive biological vulnerabilities. We cannot risk exposure." "Agreed," hummed the living cloud, a collection of intelligent gas particles held in a containment field. "Our civilization has transcended physical form. We cannot help." One by one, the most advanced species declined. Each had a reason. Their biology was too refined, too evolved, too precious to risk. Their civilizations were too important to endanger. Thompson continued watching, his expression neutral. He had seen this before, the pride of advanced species becoming their weakness. While they boasted of their evolutionary advantages, their fear showed something else. They had lost the ability to face danger head-on. "Perhaps," suggested the Quantum Collective, their holographic form flickering, "we should quarantine the entire sector, seal it off, for the greater good." Murmurs of agreement spread through the chamber. It seemed the easiest solution. Abandon the infected worlds to their fate. Thompson finally stood up. The chamber grew quiet. Humans were still seen as newcomers, barely accepted into the council. Many considered them primitive, having achieved spaceflight only recently compared to the others. "Earth will help," he said simply. Laughter echoed through the chamber. The Metal Mind's robotic body whirred as they turned to face Thompson. Your species still relies on primitive biological functions. You haven't even modified your basic genetic structure." "Exactly," Thompson replied calmly. "We're still human. We still know how to face disease, how to fight it. We've been doing it for thousands of years. This is not some simple infection." The blue speaker warned. "The pathogen adapts. It seeks out advanced life forms. Then perhaps," Thompson said, "being less advanced is an advantage. Earth has doctors who still wear protective gear, who understand quarantine procedures, who know how to fight disease without relying on genetic modifications or technological immunity." "You would risk your people?" asked the Crystal Mind, their thought patterns showing confusion. "We would help people in need," Thompson corrected. "It's what we do. It's what we've always done." He pressed a button on his tablet, and a new image appeared in the chamber. A fleet of Earth medical ships, already prepared, already staffed with volunteers. They didn't look as impressive as the sleek vessels of other civilizations. They were functional, practical, built for purpose rather than show. "Our teams are ready to deploy," Thompson said. "While you've been debating, we've been preparing." The chamber fell silent. The most advanced species in the galaxy looked at the simple human ships with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. They couldn't understand why anyone would willingly face such danger, but Thompson knew something they had forgotten. Sometimes the oldest solutions were the best ones. Sometimes being primitive meant remembering how to be brave. "We'll take care of it," he said, and turned to leave the chamber. Behind him, the advanced species of the galaxy watched in silence, confronted by a courage they no longer understood. Dr. James Miller stood in the briefing room of the medical ship Hope, looking at the faces of his volunteer team. Unlike the advanced alien medical facilities with their gleaming robotic assistants and AI surgeons, this room was simple: clean white walls, basic chairs, and a large screen showing infection maps of the affected planets. "Listen up," he said, his voice firm but calm. "We're heading into unknown territory. This pathogen is unlike anything we've seen before." He pointed to the screen where red dots showed infection zones spreading across alien worlds. But unknown doesn't mean unbeatable. The room was filled with doctors, nurses, and medical researchers from Earth. They wore their standard isolation suits, bulky white protective gear that looked ancient compared to the advanced biological shields used by alien species. But these suits had protected humans from disease for centuries, and they still worked. Dr. Anna Ward, the team's head researcher, stepped forward. Her gray hair was tied back in a practical bun, her eyes sharp behind protective glasses. "The aliens think we're crazy," she said, allowing herself a small smile. "They called our protective gear primitive museum pieces when they saw it." A light chuckle went through the room. They had all heard the mockery from the advanced species. The Crystal Mine's representatives had actually recoiled when they saw humans preparing traditional quarantine equipment. "Let them laugh," Miller said. "While they're hiding behind their advanced technology, we'll be saving lives." He brought up images of the infected aliens on the screen. "Remember your training. Treat this like any other outbreak. Basic protocols first: isolation, containment, observation." The ship's captain, Robert Hayes, entered the room. His uniform was simple but crisp, showing the discipline that Earth's medical fleet maintained. "We're approaching the first infected world," he announced. "Their orbital stations are abandoned. No other medical ships in the sector." Miller nodded. It was what they expected. The advanced species had retreated, leaving entire worlds to suffer. Their fear of contaminating their evolved forms had overcome their duty to help. "Suit up," Miller ordered. "Full protection protocols. I don't care if the aliens think we look silly. These suits kept our ancestors safe during plagues, and they'll keep us safe now." The team began their preparations. They checked each other's suits with practiced efficiency, securing seals, testing air filters, confirming communication systems. It was a ritual their kind had performed for generations, long before they reached the stars. Through the ship's windows, they could see the infected planet growing larger. Its advanced cities sparkled under its twin suns, but the usual traffic of flying vehicles was absent. The streets were empty. "They're calling us cowards," Hayes said quietly to Miller as they watched the planet approach. "The Quantum Collective's broadcasts are mocking Earth for sending primitive biologicals in protective bubbles instead of advanced medical eye." Miller checked his suit's seals one final time. "Funny thing about cowardice," he replied. "Sometimes it looks a lot like common sense. Our ancestors learned that the hard way. Better to be called a coward than to die from carelessness." The ship's medical bay was a mix of human ingenuity and basic sense. While alien hospitals relied on automated systems and AI diagnostics, the Hope carried basic isolation units, traditional medical tools, and time-tested quarantine equipment. Everything was designed to work even if advanced technology failed. "Landing team, prepare for deployment," Hayes announced over the intercom. "First wave will establish a secure treatment zone. Remember your training. This is no different from any other outbreak response." As the team lined up near the ship's airlocks, Miller looked at each of them. Despite the danger ahead, their faces showed determination rather than fear. Humans had faced diseases before. They had fought plagues, contained viruses, and survived pandemics. While the advanced species saw this as primitive and frightening, humans saw it as just another challenge to overcome. "Stay safe," Stay careful. Save lives, Miller said, giving them the traditional emergency response motto. The team nodded, their sealed helmets reflecting the ship's lights. The Hope began its descent toward the infected world. Inside their primitive protective gear, Earth's medical team prepared to do what humans had always done: help those in need, no matter the risk. The advanced species might call it cowardice, but soon they would learn that caution and courage often went hand in hand. The medical ship Hope touched down in what was once a bustling alien city. Empty streets stretched between towering buildings that reached into the clouds. The only movement came from abandoned hover vehicles drifting aimlessly in their automated lanes. Dr. Miller led the first team down the ship's ramp, their boots making soft thuds against the metallic ground. Their white isolation suits stood out sharply against the city's crystal and metal architecture. Each team member carried basic medical kits, no fancy alien tech, just proven tools and supplies. First objective is the central hospital, Miller said through his suit's radio. Stay together. Watch your suit readings. They moved through the empty streets, passing advanced medical robots that lay deactivated. The aliens' automated health system had completely failed. Holographic warning signs flickered weakly, their advanced AI systems corrupted by panic and system failures. Dr. Ward stopped suddenly, her handheld scanner beeping. "James, look at this," she called out. Miller moved to her side, looking at the simple LCD screen. Unlike the aliens' complex bioscanners, their human devices still worked perfectly. "The pathogen," Ward explained, "it's not attacking biological systems randomly. It's targeting specific modifications. The more advanced the biological enhancement, the more aggressive the attack." The team reached the hospital's main entrance. Inside, they found the tragic proof of Ward's discovery. The most advanced species, those who had modified their bodies with biotechnology, had fallen first. Their enhanced immune systems, which they had been so proud of, had been turned against them. "Over here," called one of the medical team. They had found survivors, members of the alien world's lower classes who couldn't afford biological enhancements. They were sick, but alive. Miller keyed his radio. "Captain Hayes, we need more isolation units, and get me Thompson at the council. He needs to hear this." Working quickly, the human medical team began setting up a treatment center. They used plastic barriers and airlocks, technology that would have been considered ancient by alien standards. But it worked. "The pathogen is artificial," Ward announced after running more tests. "It was engineered to target advanced biological modifications, but our primitive human biology." She smiled behind her faceplate. "It doesn't know what to do with us." Miller watched as his team treated the survivors. The aliens stared at them with multiple eyes, probably wondering why these simple beings in their bulky suits weren't dying like their advanced brethren. Their modifications made them vulnerable. Ward continued, studying her readings. All those improvements to their biology created perfect pathways for the disease. But us, she gestured to their suits. "We're protected by plastic and filters. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. Thompson's voice came through their suit radios. "Dr. Miller, the council is watching your progress. The advanced species, they're starting to understand. Their pride in their evolution became their weakness." "Send more ships," Miller replied. "The unmodified aliens can be saved. We need to set up more treatment centers, establish quarantine zones. Basic medical procedures, nothing fancy." As they worked, more survivors emerged from hiding. They were the ones the advanced species had looked down upon. The unmodified, the primitive ones. Now they were the ones with the best chance of survival. "Got another group here," called a team member. "They need help moving them to the isolation units." Miller looked at his team, tirelessly working in their bulky suits. No advanced biological shields, no AI medical systems, just humans doing what they did best, helping others survive. "The council was wrong about humans," Ward said quietly as they treated another survivor. "They thought our caution was cowardice, Our protective gear was primitive. Our methods were outdated. But sometimes the simplest solution is the right one. Outside the hospital, more medical ships were landing. Earth had sent its entire emergency response fleet. While the advanced species hid in their protected worlds, humans in their primitive protective gear were saving the galaxy. Miller checked another patient's vital signs using a basic medical scanner. "We're not here to prove anything," he said. "We're here to help. That's what humans do. We face the danger, we take precautions, and we help those in need." The sun set over the alien city, casting long shadows between the towering buildings. Inside their protective suits, Earth's medical team continued their work, proving that true advancement wasn't about how evolved you were, but about how willing you were to help others, no matter the risk. 3 weeks into the crisis, the medical ship Hope had become the center of a massive relief operation. Dr. Miller stood at the command center, his eyes tired but focused. The room's walls were covered with simple paper maps and written notes. No fancy holographic displays, just clear, reliable information. "We've lost contact with the colony on Bright Star," Captain Hayes reported, pointing to a red X on one of the maps. "Their advanced communication network failed completely. The pathogen is affecting their bio-integrated systems." Miller rubbed his eyes. His team had been working nonstop, rotating shifts in their protective suits. While the advanced species had promised to send help, none had come. Their fear of contamination kept them locked away in their protected worlds. Dr. Ward burst into the room, holding a tablet. "We have a problem. The infected aliens. They're refusing to follow quarantine protocols." "What?" Miller turned to face her. "Why?" "Pride," she explained, shaking her head. "The advanced species believe our containment methods are beneath them. They're calling our isolation units primitive cages and demanding to use their own medical technology." A screen on the wall showed the scene at Treatment Center 3. Several tall, crystalline aliens were arguing with the human medical staff. Their bodies flickered with angry colors as they pointed at the plastic isolation barriers. "Their own medical technology is what got them into this mess," Hayes said, frustration clear in his voice. "Don't they understand that?" Miller grabbed his helmet. "I'll talk to them myself." He checked his suit seals, always double-checking, always careful. That human caution that aliens mocked had kept his team alive so far. At Treatment Center 3, the situation was getting worse. The crystalline aliens had used their remaining technological abilities to bypass the quarantine barriers. Their bodies glowed with fever, showing how badly infected they were. "You don't understand," one of them said to Miller, its voice translated through crackling speakers. "We are the Crystal Mind Collective. We've evolved beyond the need for such basic protection. Your evolution is killing you," Miller replied firmly. "The pathogen uses your advanced biology against you. Our quarantine methods work. We've proven that. We would rather die than be treated like primitive beings," another alien declared, its crystalline form pulsing with diseased light. Miller stood his ground. Inside his primitive suit, he felt the weight of exhaustion from weeks of nonstop work. But he wouldn't give up. Humans never did. "Listen to me," he said, his voice calm but strong. "I don't care about your pride. I don't care about how advanced you think you are. I care about keeping you alive. Either follow our protocols or leave the treatment center. Your choice." The aliens wavered, their pride battling with their fear of death. Finally, the first one stepped back into the isolation unit. The others followed, though their crystalline bodies flickered with embarrassment. Back in the command center, Ward had more news. "The pathogen is mutating," she explained, showing Miller her latest readings. "It's learning to attack different types of biological modifications. The more advanced species are falling faster than ever." Miller looked at the numbers. They were losing too many. His team was stretched thin, working beyond exhaustion. But they couldn't stop. "What about the unmodified aliens?" he asked. "The ones who followed our protocols from the start." "They're surviving," Ward replied. Our basic treatment methods are working. Simple antibiotics, proper isolation, careful monitoring. It's not fancy, but it's keeping them alive. A message came through from Earth. More medical ships were coming, bringing additional teams and supplies. While the advanced species hid, humanity was sending everyone they could spare. We need to modify our approach, Miller said, marking new points on the map. Expand the treatment centers. Focus on the populations that will accept our help. We can't force the advanced species to survive if they won't listen. Hayes nodded. Some of them are starting to understand. The ones who survived, they're telling others. Maybe pride can't stand up to survival instinct forever. Miller looked around at his tired team. They had been called cowards for wearing protective suits, primitives for using basic medical tools, foolish for following ancient quarantine protocols. But they were the ones still standing, still fighting, still saving lives. Get some rest, he told his team. 2-hour shifts, no exceptions. We're no good to anyone if we collapse. They nodded, understanding. Humans knew their limits, respected them, and worked within them. It wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. Outside, the sun was setting on another day of the crisis. In their simple protective suits, using their basic tools and careful protocols, Earth's medical teams continued their work. They weren't the most advanced species in the galaxy, but they were the ones who showed up when it mattered. Dr. Ward stared at her microscope in the Hope's makeshift laboratory. Unlike the advanced alien labs with their quantum viewers and AI analysis systems, she used a basic optical microscope. Sometimes, she knew, you needed to see things with your own eyes. James, she called out suddenly. James, get in here. Dr. Miller rushed into the lab, still wearing his protective suit minus the helmet. Dark circles under his eyes showed his exhaustion, but they also brightened with hope at Ward's excited tone. Look at this, she said, moving aside from the microscope. Remember those basic antiseptic compounds we've been using to sterilize our equipment? Miller looked through the microscope. The slide showed the pathogen. But something was different. The usually aggressive organisms were breaking down, their complex structures falling apart. It's not just breaking down, Ward explained, her voice rising with excitement. The pathogen is being destroyed by the most basic medical sterilization compounds. The same things we've used in hospitals on Earth for over a century. Miller straightened up, his tired mind processing this information. Are you saying? Yes, Ward nodded vigorously. The pathogen is so focused on attacking advanced biological systems that it has no defense against simple antiseptics. It's like a super-advanced computer being stopped by a bucket of water. Captain Hayes entered the lab, carrying new reports. 3 more advanced species are requesting help, he said, then noticed their expressions. What's happening? Miller turned to him with a slight smile. We may have found our solution, and it's been right in front of us the whole time. Ward quickly explained her discovery. The pathogen, designed to attack advanced biological modifications, had no protection against basic medical sanitation. It was like an advanced warrior with sophisticated weapons being defeated by a simple stone. We need to test this, Miller said. He activated the ship's communication system. All teams, this is Dr. Miller. We're implementing the new treatment protocol. Stand by for instructions. In Treatment Center 1, they began their first trial. A group of infected aliens with moderate biological modifications were treated with a simple antiseptic solution, delivered through traditional medical means. No advanced technology, no complex procedures. The human medical team watched through their protective visors as the treatment took effect. Within hours, the alien symptoms began to improve. The pathogen, so deadly to advanced life forms, was being defeated by the most basic medical tools. It's working, Ward said, checking her readings. The pathogen can't adapt to defend against these simple compounds. It's too specialized for advanced systems. News of the treatment's success spread quickly. More infected aliens began arriving at the treatment centers, their pride finally breaking in the face of a working solution. Miller watched as his teams administered the treatment. Aliens who had once mocked human medical practices now waited patiently in quarantine, accepting help from doctors in primitive protective suits. "The council is calling," Hayes announced. "They want a full report on the treatment method." Miller nodded to Ward, who stepped up to explain to the council. On the screen, representatives of the most advanced species listened as she described their simple solution. "Impossible," the crystal mind representative interrupted. "Such a basic approach cannot be the answer. Where is the advanced technology? Where are the engineered cures?" "That's exactly why it works," Ward replied firmly. "You've all evolved so far beyond basic biology that you've forgotten its fundamental principles. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one." The blue speaker, their crystalline form dimmed with humility, spoke next. "We were wrong about humans. What we saw as primitive caution was actually wisdom." More medical ships arrived from Earth, carrying supplies of basic antiseptic compounds and traditional medical tools. Human doctors and nurses, still in their protective suits, trained alien medical staff in proper sanitation procedures and quarantine protocols. Miller stood at the window of the Hope's command center, watching the sunset. Beside him, Ward was organizing data on her tablet. "You know what's ironic," she said. "If they hadn't thought themselves too advanced for basic medical practices, they might have discovered this themselves." Miller nodded. "Sometimes moving forward means remembering where you came from. Humans never forgot that." Below them, the treatment centers hummed with activity. Advanced aliens were learning to use simple medical tools, to follow basic protocols, to respect the wisdom and caution. It wasn't just a cure they were learning. It was humility. "Send the treatment protocols to all affected worlds," Miller ordered. "Mark them as basic medical procedures. Let's not wound their pride more than necessary." The stars began appearing in the alien sky. Throughout the galaxy, the news was spreading. The solution had been found, and it had come from the species that remembered the value of simple things. The Galactic Council chamber looked very different from 1 month ago. Gone were the ornate biodisplays and floating holograms. Instead, simple protective barriers separated the sections, and many representatives wore basic protective gear, modeled after human designs. Thompson sat in Earth's section, Dr. Miller and Dr. Ward beside him. The humans looked oddly at home now, their simple uniforms no longer seeming out of place among the usually flashy alien attire. The blue speakers stood at the center, their crystalline form dimmed to show respect. "We have called this session to acknowledge our misconceptions," they began, "and to recognize those who saved us from ourselves." The chamber's screen showed images from across the galaxy. Human medical teams in their protective suits working alongside alien medical staff. Treatment centers where simple antiseptic procedures were defeating the deadly pathogen. Ships from Earth delivering basic medical supplies to grateful worlds. The human response to this crisis has taught us a valuable lesson. The blue speaker continued. "We had become so focused on advancement that we forgot the importance of fundamental principles." The crystal mind representative, now wearing a protective suit that looked remarkably similar to human designs, spoke next. "Our pride in our evolution nearly destroyed us. While we hid in our protected worlds, humans faced the danger with practical courage." Dr. Ward leaned over to Miller. "They're finally getting it," she whispered. Miller nodded, remembering the early days when these same species had mocked their primitive methods. The Quantum Collective's representative flickered into view. "We propose a new emergency response protocol based on human medical procedures. All worlds must maintain basic quarantine facilities and training in fundamental medical practices." Thompson stood up. "Earth will help establish these protocols," he said. "But remember, these aren't just procedures. They represent a philosophy. Never forget the basics while reaching for the stars." Around the chamber, representatives who had once looked down on humans now nodded in agreement. Many wore simple protective gear, no longer trusting solely in their advanced biological modifications. Furthermore, the blue speaker announced, "We are establishing a new division within the Galactic Council, the Emergency Response Corps, and we ask Earth to lead it. Miller watched as the chamber's screens showed more images, human medical ships arriving at distant worlds, teams in protective suits helping alien communities, simple treatment centers saving lives. What had once been mocked as primitive was now being celebrated as wisdom. The pathogen taught us a harsh lesson, the crystal mind said. Advanced evolution without basic precaution is like building a tower without a foundation. Humans understood this. What we saw as cowardice was actually the wisdom of experience. Dr. Ward stood up next, holding her tablet with the treatment data. "We've prepared a complete report on the crisis response," she said, "but our most important recommendation is this. Don't abandon basic medical practices in pursuit of advanced solutions. Keep the simple tools alongside the complex ones." The chamber filled with sounds of agreement. Species that had once competed to show off their evolutionary advancements were now discussing the importance of maintaining basic medical facilities. "There's something else," Miller added, standing beside Ward. "This crisis showed us that advancement isn't just about technology or evolution. It's about wisdom. About knowing when to use complex solutions and when to rely on simple ones." Captain Hayes, watching from the Hope via video link, sent a message to Miller's tablet. "Looks like being primitive is the new advanced." The blue speaker raised their arms for attention. "Let this crisis be remembered not as a failure of advancement, but as a lesson in humility. And let us remember those who taught us this lesson. The humans who stepped forward when we stepped back." Around the chamber, representatives began removing their ornate biological enhancements and excessive displays of advanced technology. The simple beauty of fundamental precautions was becoming the new standard. To the humans, the crystal mind announced, their voice carrying genuine respect, "We thank you. Your courage to remain cautious, to trust in proven methods, to face danger with practical wisdom. These are not signs of being primitive. They are signs of true advancement." Miller looked around the chamber, seeing how much had changed. The galaxy's most advanced species had learned that sometimes the simplest solutions were the best ones, and it had taken the supposedly primitive humans to teach them that lesson. "Maybe now," he said quietly to Ward, "they'll understand that moving forward doesn't always mean leaving the basics behind." The council session continued, but something fundamental had shifted in the galaxy. The age of reckless advancement was over. A new era had begun, one where wisdom meant knowing when to be simple and when to be advanced, and it had taken humanity's cowardly courage to make it happen. 6 months after the crisis began, the medical ship Hope prepared for its final journey home. Dr. Miller stood in the decontamination chamber, watching his team remove their protective suits for the last time. These primitive suits had protected them through countless hours of saving lives across the galaxy. "Final pathogen screening complete," Dr. Ward announced, checking her tablet. "All treatment centers report 0 new cases for the 3rd straight week. We did it, James. We really did it." The ship's common room had changed over the months. Alongside the standard human medical equipment, there were now gifts from grateful alien species. Crystals that glowed with thank you messages, metallic sculptures showing humans in their protective suits, and plaques written in various alien languages. Captain Hayes entered, holding a final report. "The last alien medical teams have completed their basic medical training," he said. "Though I have to admit, it's strange seeing the crystal mind species wearing copies of our protective suits." "Not copies," Miller corrected with a smile. "They're actually using our original designs. They said they didn't want to improve them. First time in galactic history they've chosen not to upgrade something." Through the ship's windows, they could see the changes their mission had brought to this alien world. The once purely automated hospitals now had physical isolation wards. Advanced species wore protective gear when handling dangerous materials, no longer trusting solely in their evolved immunity. "Message from the Council," Ward said, reading her tablet. "They're implementing the new medical protocols across all worlds. Basic quarantine procedures, physical protective equipment, and traditional medical training are now mandatory. They're calling it the Human Protocols." Miller shook his head, remembering how these same measures had been mocked as primitive just months ago. "Sometimes it takes a crisis to teach wisdom," he said. The ship's crew gathered for their final briefing. Many showed signs of exhaustion, but their eyes were bright with pride. They had faced a galactic crisis with nothing but basic tools and careful procedures. And they had won. "Earth Command sends their congratulations," Hayes announced to the crew. "But more importantly, they send this." He played a message showing hospitals across alien worlds. Advanced species were learning basic medical procedures, maintaining simple quarantine protocols, and keeping protective equipment ready. "We changed more than just medical practices," Ward observed. "We changed their perspective. They've learned that advancement doesn't always mean abandoning the basics." A small fleet of alien ships appeared to escort the Hope home. Their designs had changed, simpler, more practical, with physical backup systems alongside their advanced technology. The galaxy was learning to balance progress with pragmatism. "Remember how they used to call us cowards?" Miller asked, watching the escort ships. "Now they're calling us wise. All because we weren't afraid to stick to simple solutions that worked." Thompson's face appeared on the command screen, smiling. "The Council has officially recognized Earth's medical protocols as the new galactic standard," he reported. "They're even suggesting that all species maintain some primitive biological functions as a safety measure. Seems being a bit primitive is now considered advanced." The Hope's engines hummed to life as they prepared for their return journey. Below them, the alien city sparkled, but differently now. Among the advanced architecture and automated systems, there were new additions: physical medical centers, quarantine facilities, and supply stockpiles for future emergencies. "You know what the crystal mine told me," Ward said as they made their final preparations. "They said humans were the most advanced species all along. We just didn't realize that advancement could mean knowing when to keep things simple." Miller looked at his team one last time. They had gone into danger wearing nothing but primitive protective suits. They had faced a crisis using outdated medical procedures. They had been called cowards for their caution. And they had saved the galaxy. "Set course for Earth," Hayes commanded. The Hope lifted off, its escort ships forming an honor guard around it. As they broke orbit, Miller thought about how much had changed. The galaxy's most advanced species had learned humility. The supposedly primitive humans had taught wisdom. And somewhere along the way, everyone had learned that true courage sometimes looked like cowardice, and real advancement sometimes meant remembering your roots. "Mission complete," Miller said quietly, watching the alien world shrink behind them. "Time to go home." The Hope accelerated toward Earth, leaving behind a changed galaxy. In the end, it hadn't taken advanced technology or evolved biology to save civilization. It had taken human wisdom, the simple courage to face danger with caution, to trust in proven methods, and to remember that sometimes the oldest solutions were still the best ones.